When we talk about people that either have entrepreneurial tendencies and want to become business owners and entrepreneurs, but never take the leap, I don't think it's a stretch to say that it's probably in their head. Most of the time, it's well, what if I go bankrupt, and what if I lose my house and I can't support my kids? And for some reason, we don't ever process that information in the same way and say, what if I become a millionaire, or like,
Yeah.
what if I hit it big, and what if I can help a bunch of people because of all this money I make and the impact that my business would have on the community. I
Those,
mean,
those
do you think we're just wired that way? What have you learned? What
yeah,
lessons have you learned about like the human psyche, or have you,
yeah.
about why we process things that way?
So the crazy thing is, you said it very eloquently, but that's all people put that as label of fear, right? I got a fear of going on
Okay.
stage. I got a fear of, put myself out there. I got a fear of getting on video. I got a fear of talking to these bankers. I got a fear
Mhm.
of whatever. But that fear is all made up. It's all bullshit. And as a matter of fact, I would go so far to say that fear is not actually a real thing. And I know that's controversial to say because I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm sure there's somebody out there to say, oh, yeah, that is a real thing. But actually, it's not. And I think we can prove it uh, pretty easily. So, like, let's think of some things that people have fears of: snakes,
Spiders.
spiders, heights,
Failure. I think that's a
failure.
lot for entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's just walk through this real quick. There are scientists and veterinarians and people like that deal with snakes and spiders all the time. Does that mean that they won't get bitten or stung or whatever spiders do? Does that mean that? No. But does it also mean that they probably have special equipment? They have experience dealing with those things. They're doing it for the greater good. I saw a video on YouTube. This guy it bit like 6,000 times or something, but it didn't affect him anymore because he was injecting venom in himself every day to build a tolerance and like
Wow.
crazy stuff. But there are people out there that, let's say fear of heights. There's people that work on skyscrapers. There's people that,
Mhm.
work on cell towers. There's people that jump out of perfectly good airplanes for fun, right? Like there's skydivers. There's all kinds of people. So what does fear basically come down to? In my opinion, and again, I agree that this is opinion and it's subjective, but in my opinion, it's fear is only lack of education, experience, or exposure. That's the only thing that it
Mm.
is. Now that is different than understanding reality. Like, for example, somebody asked me, well, don't you teach your kids to look both ways before they cross the road because you have a fear that if they run out on the road and they get hit, that they'll get hurt? No, that's understanding reality. If a 2,000-pound car hits my child's not going to win. That's understanding reality. That's not a fear.
Mhm.
The reality is you going on stage, there's people that are scared of that,
Mhm.
right? Or going even on a podcast.
Mhm.
But here's the thing, the more you do it, there are
Mhm.
people out there that do it for a living. The more you do it, the more education. How do I deliver this message? So go get a consultant, go take a course. Like, how do you talk? How do you construct a message? And the more you practice it, the better you're going to get. The more stages you go on, the more podcasts you go on, the better you're going to be at it. And then you can just flow like we're doing now, where we can just there's no real script here. We're
Mhm.
just kind of free flowing a conversation. The more you do it with anything, the more business deals you do, the more sales you do, the more sales consulting you do, the more training you do for your salespeople, the more advertising, the more marketing, the more videos, the more whatever, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And therefore, fear is pretty much all made up unless you're stating reality. And I think our parents really do jack us up in ways. Here's an example. You see your kid climbing on something and you say, hey, don't climb on that. You'll fall and get hurt.
Mhm.
You are literally setting them up for years and years and years of struggle when they get older. A better way to do that would be like, hey, if you're going to climb on that, you better make sure you got a good holding, that you know that you're hanging on tight. Let me explain to you what happens. There's this thing called gravity, and if you let go, you're going to fall. So
Mhm.
hang on tight. Like, that is a much better lesson.
Mm.
But sometimes the people that care about us the most give us the worst lessons. They tell
Mhm.
us these little ninja splinters that get in our brain, and we remember those things for a long time, even subconsciously. And then we don't ever take a risk, right? And here's the thing. Every date you've ever been on was a risk. And do you know what the scariest thing in life should be? In my opinion.
Getting shot in Iraq.
No,
Only if you're not a Marine.
not even close. So if you live on planet Earth, the scariest thing, the thing most likely to hurt you and kill you, is riding in a car.
Mhm.
So why is it, if that's statistically, that is the most dangerous thing you do in your life. Most people do it at least a couple of times a week, even during COVID times, at least a couple of times a week you get in a car. So why is it that we're not like white knuckled, like scared to death, wide eyed the whole time that we're in a car? It's because we have education, experience, exposure. We understand the ramifications of what happens. And then we hear it so much that we just disregard the risk. But if we were comparing business to riding in a car, to driving a car, riding in a car, whatever, you should be doing like way more checklists on taking that vehicle on the road. Like, does everybody walk around and check all the air pressure and the oil and all that stuff? No, in the military you do, right? But normal people don't do that. You're not doing route plans prior to you going somewhere. As a matter of fact, we get in our car now and grab this little thing, and we'll go cross country, never knowing, like never been to a place before.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of crazy to me. We do mitigate risk in cars by law. Now you have to wear a seatbelt, but before that, nobody wore a seatbelt. I remember riding in the back window of a car when I
Me
was
too.
Just kind of sidestepping. So I know I'm sitting back and kind of listening to you all. You all are both very entrepreneurial. I just married an entrepreneur.
She's not. Yep.
I'm a former teacher. But kind of what I'm gathering from all of this, kind of going full circle. And earlier in this podcast, you were talking about fear. And basically, fear is just a lack of education, experience, and exposure. And I see this almost tying to what you all are talking about with business, with instead of, let's replace the word fear maybe with risk. And like how you said, you can mitigate fear with those three things. You can mitigate risk with those three things. Because I think back to when Dave was just starting a business. How do you mitigate the risk or the fear of going into business? Well, you do education. So, he read like crazy. You watch podcasts, like you starting playing the guitar. So by more education, that lowers your risk because now you know more what you're doing. Exposure. Maybe you befriend other business owners, or you work in a business first before you try to own that business or whatever. So that kind of goes with education and all that. And then finally, you just got to make that jump and get some experience, and you're going to learn a lot from that experience. So kind of for me, listening to you all, kind of coming full circle, turning that into not just a fear discussion, but a business discussion. How do you mitigate that risk? That risk lowers every time you do that education, experience, and exposure.